Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. It's Blake here with ChessPathways.com, and we're doing another game analysis video today. This game was sent to me by Leksandr on Lichess, so let's go ahead and get started. He opened with e4, he faced the Sicilian defense, and he says here he prefers to play the closed Sicilian because he feels like white dictates the terms there instead of black. I assume what he's talking about is, let's say we go to a typical open Sicilian here, where white plays d4 here, and you get one of these positions. Maybe he feels like black gets to kind of choose what line they want to go into. They can play the dragon, they can play the Najdorf. But I'm not sure I necessarily agree that white dictates the terms better in the closed Sicilian as opposed to like a mainline open Sicilian. I think in either case, both sides have their ideas. It's going to come down to who's better prepared, who's more familiar with the ideas. I might agree that white has to be ready for more potential ideas from black. Maybe that's what Leksandr's referring to here. I guess if you do play the open Sicilian, you have to be ready for what to do against the e6 line. You have to be ready for what to do against knight c6 with like the Kalashnikov or Sveshnikov. So I guess you do have to have more extensive preparation, whereas in the closed, your idea kind of is going to remain similar all the time. You're going to probably play an early f4, fianchetto on the king side, play for a king side attack. So it could reduce your preparation a little bit, I suppose. Anyway, let's get back to the game. So knight c3, g6, and d3. Okay, bishop g7, g3. So white's opting not to play the Grand Prix attack with the early f4. They're just going to fianchetto their bishop and finish development for the time being. Knight c6, bishop g2, d6, knight g to e2. Yeah, this is actually a very common position here in the closed Sicilian. This has been played many times before. Castle, castle, h3. Yeah, I agree with h3 here. You want to bring the bishop to e3, but if you were to play bishop e3 right away, then it looks like knight g4 is a little annoying. You might have to move the bishop again or give up the bishop pair, and it's just pleasant to keep that knight away from that square. So h3, black puts the bishop on d7. You go ahead and play bishop e3 and queen c8, attacking your h3 pawn so you defend it. King h2. This has still been played before, by the way. There's been a few games that follow this line so far. And it's worth just talking about what the typical plans are for both sides here. I guess one of the appeals of the closed Sicilian is that you can kind of achieve this position without much resistance, right? There's not much black can do to stop you from getting this kind of position if this is your goal in the Sicilian. And it's still an imbalanced game, which the Sicilian is kind of known for, but it's a different kind of imbalance than in that open Sicilian with an early d4. In this kind of position, usually white is going to be looking to expand on the king side, right? That's the direction your pawn chain points, and usually white is going to eventually play f4 or go for some kind of play on the king side, whereas black is going to be looking to expand on the queen side. Usually black is going to play b5, sometimes later b4, kind of kicking this knight away, freeing up this bishop's diagonal, and black has a lot of space on the queen side. That's where black's pawns point. So just at a high level, those are kind of the plans that go along with this position. Of course, the two fianchettoed bishops are also going to be key. A lot of times in positions with the fianchettoed bishop ends up being kind of the most important minor piece on the board. So if white can ever successfully get an e5 break-in, sorry, let me clear some of these arrows actually. Let me go back and move. If white can ever get this e5 break-in, this bishop could become very powerful along this diagonal, especially if this b5 pawn has been pushed. And this black bishop could also become very powerful on its diagonal, especially if black's getting play with the pawns here on the queen side. But if this bishop were ever exchanged off, black might have to worry about the dark squares around the king. So those are just some of the considerations kind of behind this position and what both players should be thinking about going forward as we progress from the opening to the middle game. So king h2, and black plays knight e5 here, and this move has a couple threats behind it, which it looks like the player here with white didn't fully appreciate. White mentioned that one of their plans here was to play queen d2 and bishop to h6, exchanging off those dark squared bishops to kind of weaken the black king, which is pretty typical, by the way, in these fianchettoed positions. But here it doesn't work. They played queen d2, and they ran into a tactic. Another key point to mention that's not in the annotations here is that f4 looks like a very appealing move, right? Just expanding on the king side, continuing white's kind of ambitions over there, and just chasing this knight away, but it doesn't work either because of knight g4, right? Forking the king and bishop, it loses a piece, but black's going to get it right back, and they're going to get some interest too, right? They fork the queen and rook. So that would not be good. Let's go ahead and see why queen d2 fails, though. After queen d2, Black has this little tactical shot, bishop takes h3, with the point being that white cannot take the bishop, because if white takes that bishop, the queen and king will be forked. So yeah, Leksandr, you were right to give queen d2 double question marks here. Unfortunately, this move is a blunder. And again, it comes back to just asking what your opponent's going to do. This is kind of a tricky shot to see, right? And I think it's tricky to see partially because of this other tactical idea with knight g4. I've talked about this in some of my other videos. Oftentimes your opponent will make a move that has one tactical idea that you see. You know, your opponent plays knight e5 and you say, aha, you have this knight g4 idea if I'm not careful. That's the tactical point behind this move, so I'm going to avoid that. And I think once people see this one tactical idea behind their opponent's move, they don't stop to think if there might be other tactical ideas. That's a very dangerous mental habit to fall into. I think a lot of players know to kind of blunder check and know to ask, what's my opponent doing here? But once you figure out an answer and you see this knight g4 idea, you don't stop to think about if there's other tactical possibilities here for your opponent. You kind of congratulate yourself for figuring out what they were up to. So the lesson there is just always keep looking. If you find one tactical idea for your opponent, make sure you keep looking for others. And again, as I always preach, before you make any move, ask what your opponent's going to do. Although I don't totally blame you for missing bishop takes h3. That is a pretty, not hard to see if you're looking. It's not the hardest tactic in the world. It's a small little combination, but it is kind of an unusual pattern here. Before we go forward, though, let's go back to the position after knight e5 and think about what you should play here instead. Right? We said f4 doesn't work, queen d2 doesn't work. So go ahead and pause your video here and think about what white should play in this position. Okay, if you're back with me. So this position has actually been played before, and white scores decently well here, from what I could see in the database. The move that appeals to me here, though, that I like, and this move has been played before, is queen c1. This move seems to address everything perfectly, right? Leksandr, you said one of your main plans in the position was to exchange the dark bishops. This move definitely helps support that goal, and it also makes sure none of the tactics work. Black doesn't have this resource anymore with bishop takes h3, and if black does nothing here, let's say black plays a6, you're actually threatening also to play f4 on your next turn if you want to. You could play bishop h6 right away, but you could also play f4 now, because now the knight g4 idea doesn't work, right? Just to show it. Knight g4, if black tried this now, you could just take. And you won a piece and black's not getting anything back. They can take here if they want, but your bishop's just defended, and white's winning here. I think one of the games I saw, after knight e5, white did play queen c1, and black played their knight back to c6. So if black has to play the knight back to c6, that kind of illustrates the strength of queen c1. I think white's position is pretty pleasant here. Alright, let's see how you handled things after blundering. So bishop takes h3. Okay, yeah, it looks like you made another mistake here. And this is kind of typical in chess, how one mistake follows another. It's hard to dig in and really fight back and try to find the best moves when you know your position is objectively lost. But it's one of those talents that good chess players have, just a lot of determination. They know from experience it's not always easy to convert these advantages. When you're up a pawn, even when the opponent's king is weak, you're up a pawn, it's not always an easy win. They know that. They've blown tons of these games themselves. So when they're on the opposite side, when they're on the side that's down the pawn, they want to make the life as hard as they can for their opponent and really dig in and try to fight back. So you played f4 here. Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't work. Knight to g4. Yeah, that's a problem for you. You cannot really take this bishop easily because there's going to be discovered check. So king back to g1. Black exchanges off the bishop. And they exchange off the knight. And they put their other knight on g4. So the smoke has kind of cleared from all that tactical action over there. I feel like white's lucky here to only be down a pawn after what happened. I'm sure you felt the same way, Leksandr. So you played queen f3. Black goes ahead and plays h5, trying to cement this knight in here. So okay, black's definitely better here. Black's up a pawn, but the game's far from over. You can fight back. You have a lot of space on the king side. It's definitely time to play f5, which you did. You want to get that attack going. And white has some play here. The game's by no means over. Black can't just go to an endgame here and be happy with the extra pawn. There's going to be an attack here to deal with. So black plays a6 with the idea to start trying to expand on the queen side, is my guess. Intuitively, I feel like this is a bit slow if black's idea is really to play a6 and b5 and b4 and really start, getting play going on the queen side and opening this diagonal, because white has some really serious ideas here on the king side, actually. White can bring this knight to f4, put a rook on the h-file, maybe even double rooks on the h-file. There's going to be some serious pressure here on the king side. If I was black, the move e6 looks like it might be a good alternative here instead of f5, instead of a6. Maybe play e6 and just try to tear down this pawn chain really while you have the chance. e6, immediately puts the question to white how they're going to address this, and here there's really no easy way to address this for white, I don't think. I think e6 would actually effectively kind of shut down things over here for the time being. Because what does white do here? If white takes, opening the file actually hurts their attack. It's going to lead to some exchanges here. If they don't take, after e6, if they don't take, what do they really do? There's a threat to the f5 pawn. If they just go about with their idea here to play, say, knight f4, I don't think this accomplishes anything. I think black can go ahead and take this pawn, and white's attack looks just about over. So black missed a big chance here with e6. E6 looks like a very good way to kind of eliminate the white attack. So a6, rook to h1. I think e6 would actually still be effective, but black just wasn't really seeing this idea. Black just played b5, kind of almost blindly going along with these typical Sicilian plans. Expand on the queen side, open the diagonal for the bishop completely. I think it's important to note that really white's only asset in this position is the kingside space, the potential for the kingside attack. So if black had a way to tear down this pawn chain, which it looks like you do with e6, the black player should really be looking to do that just to eliminate the white counterplay, instead of only going along with their own ideas here on the queen side. Knight f4. b4, knight c to d5. Yeah, the white pieces are getting pretty close to the king side here. Queen to b7. Yeah, and now you decide it's time to sacrifice a piece. And this definitely looks appealing, right? You take on h5, they take back, you take. You get 2 pawns for the piece. Now the knight's hanging. You can easily double on the h-file. Your knight here on d5 is very strong. You have all your pieces in the attack. Yeah, this is definitely a worthwhile investment of a piece, especially because just a few moves ago, you were almost positionally lost. So even if this position isn't completely clear, even if you can't calculate the attack out all the way, to, have the opportunity to attack in this position. And it definitely seems like a credible attack. Black has something to fear here. That's a big turn of events from how the game looked a few moves ago when you were blundering, bishop takes h3 and all that. Knight e5. You go ahead and play queen to e3. Okay, and your opponent played e6, which I agree is a blunder. You put your opponent under pressure, and they blundered. They couldn't handle the pressure. They played e6. You're allowed here to play knight to f6, and this tactic just works out. You're threatening checkmate and the bishop, and black really has no way to effectively defend both threats here. So they've got to move that rook away to make sure they don't get checkmated. But now you just go ahead and take that bishop on f6, and really there's no way out for black now. You really managed to turn this game around. Knight g6, yeah, this isn't going to solve anything. Rook h1, and you're simply threatening mate. And there you go, checkmate. All right, thanks for sharing that game. So 2 big takeaways here that I took away. Going back to this position here with queen d2. I would be curious, Leksandr, if you want to share in the comments section, do you think you partially missed bishop takes h3 because you saw the knight g4 idea? Because I think one big lesson from this game is when you see a tactical idea your opponent has when they make a move, don't assume it's the only tactical idea. Always stay vigilant. Always ask, before I make my move, what's my opponent going to do? And hopefully you would have been able to see bishop takes h3. And then the second lesson, from later in the game, something your opponent could have done, going back to this kind of position after f5, it's really important to know the common plans in the position. Like in this Sicilian structure, look, your pawns are pointing towards the queen side, your bishop's pointing that way. Yeah, a lot of games black is going to be expanding on the queen side. But you can't just do it like a robot, right? That's what I felt like black tried to do here. Black didn't know what to do, and they just started playing all the normal moves, right? a6, b5, b4, while ignoring the fact that white's building up pressure on the king side. If you ask yourself what matters most here, it's really all about black's material advantage versus white's potential attack on the king side. And if you can shut that attack down and just eliminate this pawn chain white has by playing e6 at the right moment, that's really going to turn the tide in your favor, as opposed to trying to just, expand on the queen side while white's building up huge pressure here on the king side. So don't play robotically, just according to whatever ideas there are in the opening you play or in the pawn structure. Always ask yourself what matters most about the position, and see if you can focus your search for candidate moves around that, and you'll be surprised at what you find sometimes. A move like e6 here might not always be the best move kind of positionally, And so some players will subconsciously filter it out when they're thinking of what plan to implement, what moves to play. But if you don't allow yourself to do that and filter out those moves, you'll sometimes be able to find much better moves than you would find otherwise. But yeah, other than that, you got a bad position after the blunder, but you put your opponent under pressure here, you built up an attack on the king side, and they couldn't handle the pressure. You turned the game around. So very nice job. Thanks for sending us this game. I'll see you all again soon. Thanks.